Hey again, everybody. My name's John Sanderson. This is going to be video number 3, where I'm going to talk about God and religion. So, if we go all the way back to the very first one of these that I put up, religion is sort of the uncertain part of humanity as opposed to science. Um, it's dealing with those uncertain things. And then we go into video 2 with fundamentalism, and we say that people who take those uncertain principles and then place flags on them as if they were certain in them, that's fundamentalism, and it's something that we have to reject because it's neither science nor religion. It's just kind of this own thing that's basically based on fear. So, going forward with that idea, we begin to talk about God. I think the only fair way to talk about this is to go back to when the idea first kind of began. Um, you have people who, even by the admission of Christianity and any kind of religious institution, so to speak, um, mankind is alone in the wilderness to fend for himself. That is sort of where we're at. We know that there were other hunter-gatherer societies, and we know that these people were incredibly interested in the ideas and the above sort of larger things. We've just recently uncovered a temple in Turkey, Gilibotek Tepe. Ooh, I'm pronouncing that totally wrong, and I'm so sorry. But this thing is 7,000 years older than the pyramids. Predates agriculture. It's one of those things that shows very plainly that humanity was interested in ideas that superseded its own survival, superseded itself. They would gather food and bring it to this location uh, where people must have lived and worked to maintain this temple, specifically for the interest of worship and of perhaps building community. So people are interested in these ideas before agriculture even begins. And they begin to ask these questions like, why am I here? What is the meaning of life, so to speak? Um, what lies beyond my own idea? What happens after death? These are ideas that we've never been able to explain, and we most likely will not be able to explain. I mean, who knows? Maybe in 7,000 years I'll be eating crow, and they'll be like, "Well, after death," and they'll know. But as of this moment, humanity is in a state of complete and utter uncertainty, has no idea. So humanity comes up with this concept of God, and God. Let me be very plain about something here. When Nietzsche said God is dead, right? He was speaking about the fundamentalist version of God, that God is a man that is interested in our well-being. He wishes to give us benevolence. Um, that's absolutely, that God is dead. That's a God that died before Nietzsche came around. I mean, he's not real because, and I'm going to blow some Christian minds, I'm sure of it. God is not a man. God is not a being that is real. God is not a being, right, in any way that we can comprehend. We can't even say with certainty whether he exists or does not exist. We can't even say for certain that it is a he, right? What we do know is that there is this thing inside of us that separates us from the animals, so to speak. We are a step out. We are capable of a different kind of thinking and a different kind of reasoning than animals are. And we attribute that to this idea of God, this thought. And that's what it is, it's a thought. And it's not something to be proven or disproven because that's meaningless conversation, right? That's meaningless conversation. What we want to talk about is we want to talk about um, what connects us with this sort of way of thinking. Why is this sort of thinking useful, and what we can do with it? So it's it's very important to kind of go back on these ancient texts and think about God in that sort of way. You have the book of Job, for example, which by anybody who's viewing through a fundamentalist lens, which I would say is probably most of us at this stage in the game, God looks like a total douche, right? God looks like a complete and utter, just horrible, horrible, horrible person, right? It's stories like the Book of Job that make the atheist community in particular say things like, why not just worship a spaghetti monster? Why is God better than Zeus, right? Because if you go at it from this idea that God is a man and that he has a will that he is imposing on humanity, then yeah, he's just totally just the worst. I hate him so much. He sucks. Uh, he fits very nicely into the kind of when Socrates says, uh, if the gods are real, then we shouldn't worship them. And absolutely, if that version of God exists, we should not worship him. But God is not a man. God is not a being that exists in our perception. And so when you go back and read the book of Job, it becomes very clear that, oh, this is a human story. And God is just a force, an unexplainable force that comes down upon us. Misfortune, luck. For those of you who don't know the book of Job, it's God makes a deal with the devil that Job will remain righteous even if God allows the devil to ruin his life, basically, and the devil does so with precision. And his friends come and Job's friends come and mock him, and so on and so forth. It's a very philosophical sort of conversation that happens. And you're just left with this feeling of like, man, God looked like a douchebag, but God's not a guy. God's not a person. God is fate. God is the uncontrollable aspect of humanity. God is that part of us that we don't have control over, right? It's not a man sitting there tinkering with us. It's an idea that helps us explain the things around us that are not explainable. Very specifically in the book of Job, I mean, at the end of it, God's explanation to Job why God is right, or God had, the ability to do this, is because God is bigger than us. God is a larger force. He created everything. That's what the book of Job postulates. And it is beyond your ken, it is beyond your understanding as to why these things happen, so don't worry about it. Just try and find happiness and live your life. And that's the message of the book of Job. It's a human story first. All of the stories in the Bible and in every single religious book is a human story. Stories aren't about God. They're about man and man's struggle, right? And if we start taking the focus off of humanity and we start trying to put the focus on God and we start trying to put the focus on God the man, right? If we start trying to say, like, what kind of pasta sauce does God like? It's not going to help us. It's going to lead us down a path that is going to make us look like a bunch of idiots. And frankly, that's what's happening right now. We have opened the door to mockery, and we are being mocked. And I say we as in the religious community. We are being rightfully mocked because we're holding on to a value that is foolish. God is not a person, and we need to stop thinking that way. Because once we free ourselves from that idea that God is a person, then we can actually start communicating with each other in a very real way about what God is, what it represents, and we can start talking to each other about the fears we have about God and about the afterlife and about all of these kinds of things, about our own lives, about sort of the meaningless that we're faced with. And we can start talking to each other in a very real way about how are we supported by this sort of force or this idea? Are we... In the end of it all, we need to talk about God in a way that reminds us that we're all in this together. Because God created all of us. if you wish to believe that. So that's my 10 minutes, everybody. And please leave your comments in my email, and I'll respond to them. I have nothing but interest in open, healthy, communicative debate. Thanks for your time. I hope you enjoyed this, and there'll be more in the future. Bye.